Welcome to the Matt Sager Podcast, Thursday, December 6th. I am, of course, your host, Matt Sager. How's your week going so far? If it's good or if it's bad, regardless, the weekend is upon us. So I hope you got some plans. I personally have a date, and then I'm going to the gym, and I'm doing holiday shopping. Basically the exact same weekend I had this time last week, with the exception of I've also got a voiceover gig that I've got to record here at the home studio. And when I say I've gotta, I mean, it is fun. I enjoy my work enormously, although this idiotic former coworker of mine in a one-sided feud with me on his podcast says, "How dare you call yourself a voiceover talent? You don't have any talent." And I would call that splitting hairs and extremely petty. And my God, sir, you are nearly 60 years old. Enough already. We're adults. Kind of. Not that my taste in entertainment necessarily runs toward the most mature, although Netflix's Daredevil went a long way toward legitimizing and explaining to any outsiders of the genre what is so great, so all ages mature, and so potentially badass and genuinely captivating storytelling in adaptations of comics. I've remarked on some of the flaws in its third and, as we now know, final season, but that doesn't mean at any point I was unaware that it was an amazing show. It's probably the best superhero TV we'll ever have in our lifetime. It kicked ass on every level. And in dissecting its fate, the announcement that took everyone by surprise earlier in the week that it was not going to be renewed for season 4, I said, I was very glib about it because I said, Disney's about to debut Disney Plus, their streaming service, which as far as I know is going to be the home for all their Marvel content going forward. I'd read words to the effect that there was going to be no ongoing Marvel-Netflix relationship, and that may very well still turn out to have been the truth. But Disney Plus doesn't launch till nearly the end of 2019, and everyone was shell-shocked, really taken aback, and quite unprepared for the cancellation of Daredevil, including, as we now know, star and the man who plays Matt Murdock and the titular Daredevil, Charlie Cox. He was interviewed for Entertainment Weekly, and he says of the cancellation, "A lot of us really expected it to keep going, and I certainly did. The truth is, I felt like we had a lot of stories to tell, and although I understand the cancellation, I'm very saddened by that." I would agree. And if Charlie Cox is acknowledging that he was taken by surprise, this was unexpected, then this is not, as I previously alluded, some kind of corporate thing that everyone knew was going to happen and that was part of an ongoing plan. It was a shock. Particularly since, I've spoken about the show's declining numbers, and they were in decline. Season 2 had inestimably less viewers than Season 1, and the same was true of Season 3, and yet, at the time of its cancellation, numbers be damned. Every one of these numbers for every Netflix series is constantly in flux. And so Daredevil Season 3, the lowest rated season of the show to date, and now, as we know, the lowest rated season it'll ever have, was still number 4 most popular, most watched Netflix's original programming. So that is odd. To cancel a show in your top 5, that is unusual, to say the very least. The showrunners made no secret that, I believe it was November 16th, he had a meeting with Netflix. He came back and reported on it and said, "Oh yeah, I think they're really going for it. I believe season 4 is all but done. We can start working on it right now." And then a couple weeks later, the hammer came down and Daredevil ended up going the way of Iron Fist, Luke Cage, and undoubtedly in due time, very soon, Jessica Jones and The Punisher. Those shows are slated for a 3rd and 2nd season, respectively, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if those get canceled or even get produced, as The Punisher, I believe, has been, and yet just never make it to air. Earlier this week, IO9, a popular website for genre TV and entertainment and books and comics, sci-fi, stuff like that, spoke with one of Daredevil's writers, who also had written for Iron Fist, a woman named Tamara Becker Wilkinson. And she agreed with me on at least one count here. Her standout quote from this interview regarding the end of Daredevil was, quote, "If I was a betting woman, my guess is that it's the end of the Marvel Universe on Netflix." I'd said words to that effect earlier this week, in which I said, look, Jessica Jones has a season 3 scheduled. Punisher has already produced their season 2. But it would be almost weird if those shows didn't get pulled, because this entire universe was built on the foundation of Daredevil. Daredevil, no offense to the many other great series, except Iron Fist, which did suck, and The Defenders, which was quite underwhelming. But Jessica Jones was spectacular, Luke Cage was great, Punisher was very, very good. But Daredevil, my God, if we get better superhero TV in our lifetimes, we should be very, very grateful. because that show punctured every illusion that people had about the limitations of the genre. It expanded the way I thought of the genre, certainly the way other television producers and filmmakers thought of it. It really advanced storytelling adapted from and based on superheroes and comics. This Tamara Becker Wilkinson, she wrote one of the episodes of season 3 of Daredevil, a really great episode called Karen. And she'd already gotten her invitation to return for season 4. She was in the writer's room when the news broke. Oh, that must have been an incredibly unpleasant moment. People already breaking down beats and character arcs and the story of season 4, and then, oh, sorry, folks. She says Eric Olson, referring to the showrunner, got a call asking him to go down to see the Marvel executives, and I jokingly said, ooh, like a third grader does when someone gets called to the principal's office. Then he waited for everybody to gather back in the writer's room, and he said, Netflix has decided not to move forward with season 4. And that's all I remember, I kind of missed the details because I was, so surprised. I'm guessing she was in some very, very mild form of shock. That they're sitting there in the writer's room, breaking down the events of season 4, figuring out how to get started, and then just be deflated like that, that's horrible. She goes on to say the reviews were so overwhelmingly positive that I thought there was no way they would cancel it. I don't know how well it does on Netflix or anything like that. And that's an unfortunate statement. Sidebar. The way Netflix does not share its numbers is bad for everybody. Daredevil's creators, writers, and producers should know their numbers, as should the viewers. There is no secret box office receipts or anything like that. When a movie, whether it's expected to be a blockbuster or not, has its opening weekend, you can track it across IMDb, Deadline, Hollywood Reporter. Box office receipts are not kept hidden. Ditto, Nielsen ratings have for 90 years now kept an exact tally of how many people from which demographic watched these various television shows on network and cable TV. Netflix has these numbers at their disposal in much greater detail. And they can break it down by exact demographic and exact numbers and even what time of day people are watching these on-demand shows. But they don't. They keep it hidden. And I question why. I never like when entities that have access to an extraordinary amount of our personal information choose to keep that secret. I find that untrustworthy and disturbing. But getting back to Tamara Becker Wilkinson, I apologize for that little detour. I don't know how well it does on Netflix or anything like that, she says, but it was surprising to me that they would cancel something that was so well received. I thought it was too big to fail. Okay, let's make a vow, people. Don't ever call anything too big to fail, because that is a reference to one of the most awful, devastating events in the history of this country and the world. That refers to calling the banks too big to fail in 2008, 2009, the housing mortgage lending crisis, in which it turned out that the banks were robbing Americans blind. Many people lost their homes, their life savings, everything they ever owned, and the banks got a bailout. Why? Because the government determined they were too big to fail, that if any of these parasitic institutions were to be punished in any way for robbing millions upon millions of Americans of everything they owned, that then things might become bad. And we wouldn't want that. So, too big to fail is a very stupid thing to say, and when you call yourself that, you're basically begging to be canceled. Not that I'm saying that Daredevil deserved to be canceled for that glibber mark or any other reason. I'm just saying you don't want to call yourself that. It's like saying, oh, I thought I was safe, like Hitler did in the bunker. It's a terrible thing to associate yourself with, is my point. So this really changes my opinion about the cancellation, which I thought was just a matter of, oh yeah, of course they're pulling it. Daredevil has a future on Disney+. But it turns out that he most definitively does not. Disney+ has stated that while Marvel does have plans for Daredevil, they don't know if it's going to involve Charlie Cox, Deborah Ann Wall, or any of the cast, crew, showrunners, producers, writers, etc. of the Netflix series. Just that Daredevil will be integrated into the Marvel Universe and not on Disney+, but likely in the next phase of their various Avengers movies. Possibly even, talk about being associated with something uncomfortable, possibly even another Daredevil movie. One that, look, it's not 2003 anymore. I'm confident that Marvel can get this right. Marvel has really learned to stick the landing when it comes to film adaptations of their superhero and comic book properties. But this is very sad. It makes me very sad. I maintain that season 3 of Daredevil was very problematic. It also had some of the best episodes ever of the series. I did not like the finale. And I also didn't like the premiere, and I really, really got hung up on some terrible problems with episode 3. So it was imperfect. Do I wish it harm? Do I wish it off our airwaves? Do I no longer respect it as an amazing piece of programming and just the best representation of comics and superheroes on TV? No, I'll miss it terribly. I was extremely fond of the show. I think it did amazing things that will continue to reverberate and influence our culture. Last week I talked about how Joss Whedon's shows Firefly, Angel, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer are now streaming free on Facebook Watch. And what a shame it was that these shows, which laid the groundwork, opened so many doors, changed the way people thought of dialogue and storytelling, made the idea of superheroes much more palatable and mainstream. And yet were never appreciated in their time, were canceled prematurely, and just generally shat upon. And then very soon after, Fox, WB, UPN, all these various networks that were dealing with Joss Whedon and treating him horribly when he was a showrunner for these series. As soon as they went off the air, they went running back to him and saying, come on, things weren't so bad. How about that Firefly movie, big guy? Come on. And he's sitting there going, you never let me air the pilot. But fine, I'll make Serenity. But what really we as fans got out of those shows, after they prematurely ended, was the ripple effect. That, for instance, Battlestar Galactica could be relaunched and be one of the best television series of the last 50 years. That in turn, we could have stuff like The Expanse and Westworld. Buffy is now so beloved it's getting a reboot. And that is almost certainly the fate of Daredevil. That it will be remembered for its massive influence, that its cast and crew will find many jobs, roles, etc. going forward from here, and that the only real losers here are us, the viewers, who had something really, really special there, and that's a shame. I did not know that it was a surprise. I did not know that Daredevil has no future on the Disney streaming service Disney+, and I didn't know that it was done so suddenly and abruptly at the moment the writers are convening to strategize for season 4. Just all of that really blows, and I apologize to everyone. Cast, crew, viewers, myself. In slightly better television news, there's a teaser video out today for season 8, finally, of Game of Thrones. It's coming in just a few months, and this thing looks amazing. I'll link to it in the description for tonight's podcast episode. But without giving too much away, the final season's going to revolve around Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen, combining forces and finally driving the White Walkers away permanently. So check out this video. Finally, boy, what a depressing episode tonight's turning out to be. I'm very sad to report to you that Pete Shelley died. If you don't know that name, he was the frontman, the singer and guitarist of the Buzzcocks. Ever Fallen in Love with Someone You Shouldn't Have, Fast Cars. Basically, every single one of their songs could have been and should have been a single. They were the most poppy punks ever. I've been a fan forever. It was just this time last week that I was saying, oh my God, Bleecker Bob died. I never thought that would happen. He turned me on to the Buzzcocks. It feels like everything is just sort of unraveling. Shelley was 63, and as of now, doctors are saying it was likely a heart attack, but it is not official yet. Wow, what a depressing evening. I hope it gets much, much better, and that tomorrow night I've got an episode that's just all great news. Because it's way better to go into a weekend on a happy note than a downer. So let us hope that this is the lowest point of the week and it all goes uphill from here. Get in touch with the Matt Sager podcast. Email matt@mattsager.com or call me at 646-535-4788. You can also reach me on Twitter. I'm at Matt Sager. On Instagram, I'm Real Matt Sager, and on Facebook, I'm The Matt Sager. Also, check out my voice talent page, Matt Sager VO. And please check out, join, and like this podcast page, Matt Sager Podcast. Also, check out the links in tonight's podcast episode description for links to my merch store from my friends at wehavemerch.com, and also links to my Patreon, patreon.com/Matt Sager. As for the rest, more social media links, back episodes of this podcast, my voiceover reels, contact info, articles, blog posts, and more. You can find all that at mattsagervoiceover.com.